What a joy it is. So, we had already studied the first two sentences of this mantra, this Shanti mantra, the seventh one. My speech is established in my mind and my mind is established in my speech, by which quintessentially what the master here means is that may my speech be established in my mind, which means that may I contemplate by becoming silent. And that is the meaning of the Sanskrit word for silence, mauna, which literally in fact means contemplation. Because Muni, such as Sage Patanjali, is a Muni, a contemplative. And when we contemplate, we become silent. So this is an expression that may my speech be established in my mind, may my speech enter my mind, which is also found elsewhere in the Upanishads, in the sense of becoming silent. And if I speak, then may I speak with my understanding, with my mind fully present in whatever I speak. So may I speak with understanding. This much we had already studied. Why so much importance on speech? Why so much importance on words? So even though it is true that the ultimate essence that the masters speak of, that Mahidasa Aitareya, the seer of this mantra, is speaking of, is a fable, which means cannot be expressed properly, completely in its totality in words. It is transverbal. Any experience essentially is very difficult to convey if you depend only on words. How to convey the sweetness of sugar to someone who has not experienced it himself or herself? How to convey the beautiful feelings of love to someone who has never experienced it? But the worse is if someone who has never experienced love speaks of love, or someone who has never tasted sugar tries to describe the sweetness of sugar, that would be precisely what Mahidas Aidareya is warning against. That if I speak, then let me speak from understanding, from experience. Otherwise, let me not speak, so that I can enter within an experience. So why I'm spending a few more moments on this, not to go into either of the two extremes. Yes, silence as a practice has been included by Patanjali under tapas. So it is in fact as a practice even before asana. Because if you look at the niyamas, the third one is tapas. And tapas on the level of speech includes the practice of silence. And it is essential also for our asana practice. If we want to use our asana, our practice of asana to enter deeper within ourselves, then we have to make use of this tool of silence. Because that gives us the opportunity. Try practicing asana while speaking to someone else. First of all, it is very difficult. And that is why, for example, for teachers to demonstrate at the same time, it is very difficult. Only a few can really do it. And secondly, it's not only just because our breathing, we become breathless, not only because of that, but also so that our mind, our awareness, our attention can be locked completely within the body. I think one of the first things that one comes across even on books of yogic anatomy is one of the first things that these doctors who have tried to understand what happens in the body based of their anatomical understanding, what happens in yoga, and they have tried to describe it, such as, for example, there's a beautiful book, The Anatomy of Hatha Yoga, quite well known and well read. One of the first things that he mentions is that an advanced practice is not to be able to perform the most advanced postures, such as scorpion pose, etc. But an advanced practice is a practice in which the attention is present completely within the body. If that is absent, then even the most advanced posture will be a very preliminary, non-advanced basic practice. And if that is the case, then even if a person is standing in simple asanas such as Tadasana, still it is a very advanced posture if the attention is completely within the body. So silence, but again, sometimes people take these practices to the extreme. And extremes are always to be avoided. And that is why sort of this teaching brings us back to the balance. Silence when there is a lack of experience, and when we speak, then we speak from understanding, from experience. Both are essential. If we become completely silent, it is selfishness, because then we are not conveying what we have learned, what we have understood. We are not sharing it with others. So we are just accumulating but not sharing. Sharing occurs, and that's why when it comes to the Upanishadic teachings, you will always see Patanjali only mentions Swadhyaya, but the Upanishadic teachings always mention two things together: Swadhyaya And the second one, which Patanjali hasn't mentioned, but obviously he's doing, otherwise we wouldn't have had the Yoga Sutras, is pravachana. Pravachana, speaking out. Self-study, swadhyaya, and then pravachana. Pravachana, which means speaking out. So always, if you look at the Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, the parting message of a teacher to his student after he has completed his 12 years of study, in the parting message he says, Swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam. Never be negligent, lazy in Swadhyaya. So you have completed your education for 12 years. Now you are a Snataka. How do we translate Snataka in English? Now after you have completed your education. Yeah, you are graduate. Graduation in India is Snataka, and it means somebody who has taken his final bath. It used to be a ritual bath after completing their education. They would do the final purification ceremony, and so that was called completion. And as part of that message, he's saying that you have completed your education, but that doesn't mean that you stop learning simply because you have now got a degree of an acharya, of a teacher. You constantly never should be negligent in accumulating new knowledge, and at the same time also pravachana, sharing it. So a balance has to be found between silence and speaking. So, and that is, so even though despite the fact that we know that words cannot express the truth, and they can only give us a limited insight, a limited vision, a limited view into the nature of reality. And yet, it is a tool, and a tool has to be used constantly for it to remain healthy and well. I have been talking about the idea of yajna. Yajna, repeatedly I've been coming back to this idea of yajna because it is really a very fundamental idea to the Upanishadic teachings, to the Vedic way of life. But the moment we hear the word yajna, we always just think of fire sacrifice. That is what everybody thinks of. Yet in the yogic context, yajna has a deeper meaning. It certainly means sacrifice, but it means to sacrifice something to create something greater. Whenever we want to create something greater, something grand, then something always has to be sacrificed. And it is this principle of sacrifice which occurs everywhere. If the sun is shining, sacrifice is going on there. For new life to be created, anything new to be created, some sacrifice is essential. And that sacrifice is yajna. But there are several ideas related to yajna. That's why yoga, for example, the practice of yoga is a form of yajna. Pranayama is a form of yajna. Study is a form of yajna. Yajna has a universal implication. Meditation is a form of yajna. There are so many forms of yajna, not only just one. That is, on the level of speech, are kept at bay. What Patanjali did, we pray every day. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena. Oh Patanjali, you were wonderful. You removed the impurities of speech by composing a beautiful treatise on grammar. You've removed the impurities from the mind by composing a beautiful work of yoga. The Yoga Sutras. You removed the impurities of the body by composing a beautiful work on Ayurveda. But what do we do? He did it. But what do we do to remove the impurities on the level of this body, on the level of this mind, and on the level of this speech? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. For this, I think, these three yajnas, again coming back to the idea of yajna, these three yajnas, yoga yajna, the yajna of yoga, which includes asana, swadhyaya yajna, using Krishna's words, not my words, yoga yajna, swadhyaya yajna, the second one on the level of speech, and jnana yajna, the yajna of jnana, knowledge. This one. These three yajnas are essential. And that's why I'm saying that the moment we hear the word yajna, if our mind straight away jumps to fire sacrifice, we are losing the point that the masters want to convey. This is why, yes? Let me write them down. So I'm not writing the second word, just the first word. Yoga yajna is the first one. Swadhyaya yajna is the second one. And jnana yajna is the third one. And this is why, even though knowing that words are extremely limited, and yet they are our connection to these ancient yogins, these ancient masters. That is the only way we can access them who lived 3, 4, 5 thousands of years ago, 3,000, 4,000, 5. This is the only connection which we have to them, their words. And that's why, at least not for the ultimate experience, but at least to understand them, to understand their experience, to relate with their experience, the only connection that we have is through words. And that is why sometimes I spend so much time in analyzing words, in contemplating on them, so that, because it is important, so that we can properly convey the idea, not a confused, conflated idea, but a very clear. And for that, clarity of words is extremely important. What I personally find in this is that something that Vyasa points out in the context of Swadhyaya, in the sutra on Swadhyaya, while commenting on the sutra on Swadhyaya, he says that with the practice of Swadhyaya, one can meet the rishis, take their help, and use them, take their help in one's spiritual evolution, in one's spiritual, for the lack of a better word, spiritual. And they really help us in achieving our purpose. This is what Vyasa points out in the context of Swadhyaya. I think there is some truth in it which has to be experienced and which can be experienced when a person meditates on their teachings. Because ultimately, I think after a master ceases to exist in their physical body, they do indeed exist in the form of their teachings, in the form of their words. And like this, it is a wonderful way to connect with those teachers. So if, for example, someone like Krishnamacharya said that he revived some of the yogic teachings by connecting to 10th century masters such as Natha Muni. And historians disregard such facts. They say, how is this possible? How can someone from the 20th century connect back with someone on the 10th century? Some people maybe laugh at it, but he had a point in that, which is possible when a person goes deeper into Swadhyaya. Ultimately, I think the greatest benefit of Swadhyaya is a kind of joy which is immensely peaceful in nature, which results when we contemplate and meditate. But of course, this should not become a trap. This is just a means, a wonderful means. A person even has to go further than this. So, with this, I think we can end this section. And now comes the second, the third sentence. O the evident one, become manifest for me by removing the veil of ignorance. If you remember, when I was speaking about the teachings of this master, just to bring things into the context, the word that he uses here, become manifest, aviravi. It is also the word that we use in English language. For example, if we would say that Newton discovered gravity, in Hindi we would say that Newton ne Gurutwakarshan Shakti ka avishkar, that word avishkar, avir, to make something manifest. Which it simply the point is not to create something new, but something which was ever present, to make it known, to make it appear, to be able to conceive it, perceive it. That is what the word avir in Sanskrit means, what Newton did with gravity. He made us aware of it. Gravity was existing from the very beginning of creation. But what did he do just 500 years ago? Didn't anybody else know that gravity exists? Maybe not. Maybe yes. I don't know. The Upanishads speak of downward pull of earth, which they refer to as apana. So remember, apana means downward flow. So they refer to Mother Earth as the goddess of apana, because she pulls everything towards her. So obviously they are referring to gravity. But the way he presented it, of course, that was an extremely novel idea. And that's why it is called Avishkara in Sanskrit language. And the same word has been used here. When I was going through the teachings of Mahidasa Aitariya, just to put this into context, if you remember, I spoke about his idea of meditating on the first letter of most of the alphabets of most languages, and why, for example, in Sanskrit, I don't know if any other language can answer why A is the first letter. But in Sanskrit, the answer is because it is the only letter that there is. From below, A is the letter which comes up. And it is only after reaching different parts, E, it's A. But just here, E, U, it's A. But you change your mouth in a certain way, it becomes U. And the same thing, hit in different places, touch in different places. Ta, ka, touch here. This touching just changes the letter. But in reality, the fundamental, basic one letter in which all letters are united, that is A. And this practice of always seeing the unifying factor in multiplicity is a fundamental practice of yoga. Patanjali refers to it as Ekatattva Bhyasa in the first chapter. Before he starts speaking of the deeper states of meditation, he speaks of practicing to focus one's attention on one essence, one underlying essence within many. So yes, there are maybe 100 human beings, but how are they united? Yes, their faces are different. So there are so many things that might be different, but not to get carried away by that difference, but to focus one's attention to the underlying unity, to that which unites them, which makes them one, which brings them together, to be focused on that. This is how the practice of yoga always proceeds. And that is also what we see with all the symbols that the masters have made use of. In fact, Brahman consciousness of the Upanishads is nothing but the unifying factor of everything that exists. So it's a constant search of a unifying factor within and without, which leads, for example, Mahidas Aitareya to proclaim that Prajnana, consciousness within me, is one and the same with consciousness which is present all around me. So first of all, he searches within himself, and of course there are so many things to be found within oneself, so many thoughts, so many ideas, so many faculties, so many senses, so many internal and external instruments. Yet, as one person analyzes, there seems to be a fundamental grounding factor, which is consciousness within. And so that is how he reaches. So the same he does with his practice of meditating on the first letter, which is also, by the way, the first letter in Om. So it's part of that meditation. Meditation on Om, meditation on Ma comes later. They have different meanings. But meditation on A. That was the first. And that's why multiplicity and unity was never seen as conflicting by the Vedic masters. That is their fundamental philosophy. Ekam Sat. Yes, the truth is one. And that's what all the masters have proclaimed. But what makes them unique, to my understanding, what makes them unique is the next statement. But the wise express it in countless ways. So it's not a kind of unity which forces everyone into becoming one, but it is an acknowledgement of complete diversity from person to person, within person. Everywhere there is this endless diversity, and that is what makes everything so beautiful. So not denying that, not destroying that, but keeping one's attention at this apparent diversity we all see. But if we get carried away by this diversity, we create divisions, we create walls. And that's why an internal understanding of unity is also required. So, but if we emphasize too much on unity, we again create division. Because we force, so many religions came, one God, one truth, but what happened? They created so much problem because everyone then had to be shaped in that view. So there was no acceptance for diversity. What we need is both. And our meditation on is such a simple technique to make us aware of. This doesn't mean that meditation on we stop speaking all other words and we just start saying that's what those people do who cannot sadly who don't have proper tongues. They just that's all what they can speak. So that's what they do. That would be forcing everything into that one. But speaking all the letters, all the 43 letters of Sanskrit language, and however many letters there are in other languages, but at the same time, remaining aware that deep down they are one and the same letter. So this awareness on two levels, apparent truth and deep truth, this always goes hand in hand. Multiplicity on an apparent level and diversity in unity on a deeper fundamental level, and an acceptance of both. That is the first thing that he speaks about. Mahidasa Aitareya, the seer of this mantra, brings this through meditation on Then the second thing what he does is that he first asks his, and I've explained this earlier also, that he asks his student to pronounce loudly for a while and meditate on a loud pronunciation of And then, as is the method of japa, first of all we repeat a mantra loudly, and then there are 3 levels of japa. Japa means recitation of mantra. The first one is to pronounce it loudly, like we did right now. The second level of japa, which is a deeper level of japa, is to pronounce the same mantra only by moving your lips. So then you are no more shouting it out like a war cry. Yesterday, Terence, he left this comment on my Facebook page that some people shout out Yogeda Chittasya, the prayer to Sage Patanjali, like a war cry. Initially, some do. And he even posted a video of the Maori dance. This is how they pronounce Yogeda Chittasya. Initially fine, very good, wonderful. But then it has to come on the level of Upanusha, where we just move our lips as a support so that our mind doesn't wander away, our mind remains with the mantra, just as a support. So just the lips are moved. Nobody hears it, just I myself at best can hear it. That's all. That is the second level of japa, and the third level is mental. And this is very difficult. If you want to remain with one mantra on a mental level, completely on a mental level, it is very difficult. In a few moments, the mind wanders away. It requires constant practice. And it is by shifting, then the moment the mind wanders away, then one again has to come back to the lip japa. Or if that even doesn't work, then again to shout it out. So this is how japa goes deeper. And that is mental japa is where japa then proceeds into meditation. That's why japa is really a wonderful means to practice, a wonderful preparation to practice meditation. Because manasa japa, mental japa, prepares for meditation. So what he says there is, he says that first of all he asks his student to do japa on loudly, and then just in lips, so that no one can hear it, only you know that you are doing it. This is how he conveys the idea of the internal body. He says that the japa that you were, the pronunciation of, the loud pronunciation of the mantra was a symbol to the physical body, which is clearly manifest. Like when I say everybody can hear it, and they can, in the same way, they can also see my physical body. But then there is a subtle body, and the subtle body is nothing but the pranas, the energy that exists in the 5 senses of perception, in the 5 senses of action, the energy which manifests in the form of the mind, the intellect, the sense of I, and memory. All these faculties, the energy that arises as all these faculties, for him, they are symbolized by the that no one can hear. So you are pronouncing it, You know that it is there, but no one can hear it. What is happening within me, my prana, my thoughts, my ideas, whatever, that is inaccessible to anyone. And then, in that context, he uses this word for the physical body. What he is now using for the deeper truth. Therefore, what he really wants to say is, O the evident one, become manifest for me like the physical body. This is what I wanted to explain. In the same way, like I have no doubt, should I doubt that my physical body exists? The firm conviction that I have about my physical body, that it exists, and therefore I have no doubt in it, and I can see it, I experience it, I feel it. How much I know it, that's a different story. That only after starting, many times I used to hear my mother saying that, or I used to hear Guruji saying that, because she used to quote Guruji, that we don't even know our physical body. Then I used to say, what's the problem with me? What's lacking? I know myself, I know my physical body, I understand it. But that is the problem with ignorance. When we are ignorant of something, we don't even know what we are ignorant of. It is only with the practice of yoga that this started making sense. And I started realizing that even though I thought that I knew so much about my body, and yet I knew nothing compared to whatever little bit practice of yoga teaches me of my body, puts me directly in contact. And yet, the same expression, why I gave this long story, was simply to point out, become manifest for me like the physical body. So the consciousness that he has spoken of, which eludes us, which is though it is the most evident one, because everything that we perceive is through consciousness, it is the most evident one, and yet every time we perceive something through consciousness, our attention straight away goes into the object and never remains with that through which we see that object. I see a tree, I think of the tree. I see a river, wow, what a beautiful river. Start taking pictures. But how many of us turn back and take a selfie? But not with our smartphone, with our mind. Say, who is seeing this beautiful river? Through what am I seeing this beautiful river? What is that which is enabling me to enjoy the beauty of this river? Then we will become first aware of light, the importance of light, which is again something we see everything in light, and yet light remains hidden. Because light remains invisible. And that's why we see everything in its light. But how many of us think of light when we see something? We only realize it when it's switched off. Then we realize, oh, we need light. Otherwise, we don't even notice it. We are happy with what we see in light. But our attention doesn't go. Then, if this external light is so subtle, then even more subtle is the internal light. And the problem lies, I will come back to this idea again, why despite being so evident means so immediate, closest to ourselves, and yet we fail to notice it. What is the problem? These are just words which I have added by removing the veil of ignorance. These are just words of the commentator. But what is this veil of ignorance? Why do we sometimes neglect that which is the closest to us? I think isn't it that even on a physical level, this is in fact true. We know so much about things around us, where you can get the best pizza, where you can get the best coffee, where you can have we know everything about our city. Where can I get the best sweater, where I can get the best clothes. We know everything. But ask any one of these, the hundreds and thousands of people, what exists within their body, just on a purely physical level. On a purely physical level, how much do we know about what exists within us? It's just look at a video of anatomy. Yesterday I was interested in exploring the diaphragm. I really wanted to understand what the diaphragm does and why there is so much importance of diaphragmatic breathing. So I wanted to see a diaphragm. So what can I do? Then I looked up in YouTube anatomical videos on the diaphragm. And of course you have to be prepared for it because it's human body. The human body has to be opened up. You need strength to look at it. But it's amazing. It's amazing how complex this is. We have no idea of its complexities. What a miracle, what a wonderful miracle, I would say. People are stupid that they are looking for miracles out there. Changing wine into water, is that a miracle? Does that count as a miracle? Yes. Or Madhvacharya performed great miracle. He walked on the water, across the other side of the river, a great sage. These are miracles for those who have no understanding what even miracle means. If you would look for a miracle, then I think this and everything in this is a miracle, is a mystery, greatest miracle. I can't think of any greater miracle than this human body, which is ever present with us, but because we never look into ourselves, we have no idea how complex this is. So, that is the problem, that what is closest to us, we fail to notice. Even if it's this physical body, forget about the mind, forget about the breath, forget about consciousness. These are deeper, subtle principles within the human body. Just even this human body is so difficult, so little we know about it. I think it's true on every level. We know, even scientifically, I think we know so much about the universe around us, but still what lies within the earth is still to a great extent hidden and a big mystery. What lies beneath our feet. We have explored the grandness of the universe, but what lies beneath us is still mysterious. The same is true about our physical body. So, but he's saying that come back to this. Any questions, any thoughts, any feedback, anything you would like to share? Yes?
In Chinese language, we have a phrase describing the speech. Someone speak very talkative, very fluently. We say 口若悬河. This means he talk like falling waterfall.
Like
waterfall.
Like a
the
waterfall.
waterfall.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that image of flow is there.
Yeah, so
It's very interesting.
Russia.
Yes.
Russian, the speech is same.
The same word they use for.
Yeah, we have the phrase describe the speech like a waterfall.
Like a waterfall.
口若悬河.
It's very interesting. Yeah. It's constantly flowing from in to out. The masters say that this river on every level should flow from darkness to light, from what is less beautiful to what is more beautiful, and from restlessness towards peacefulness. That should be the direction of the flow. I think that's why I like these two words, centrifugal and centripetal. Centrifugal, you have a center, and from the center spreads out. That is centrifugal, spreading away from the center. That is one way of flow. And the second way of flow is centripetal, when it flows towards the center. And I think both are flows. What is happening naturally, this is a centrifugal flow. And what yoga instills through practice on every level is a centripetal flow. And that's why our daily life exhausts and yoga rejuvenates, because it's a centripetal flow. That's why it rejuvenates.
We have another phrase. It says silence is the gold.
Silence?
Silence is the gold.
Goat.
Gold. 沉默是金. It means silence is the
Gold or goat?
Gold. G-O-L-D.
Gold. Okay. Okay. Thank God. Thank God. I was thinking of that goat.
Yeah. It's the most valuable. Yeah, it's the most valuable thing.
Silence is gold. Silence is gold.
It's gold.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Huh? In Portuguese, the same. Ah.
In English, we have it too. We say silence is gold.
Okay. Great. Silence is gold.
Golden.
Yeah.
In English, we say silence.
Silence is golden.
It's the adjective.
Do we know who said it first? From where it comes?
Maybe translate from China.
Maybe.
Very old.
Yes. We realize how it. Yes. Yes.
So that's why maybe Guruji and Mataji, whatever they teach us are doing the work, and then be able to know ourselves. If we just go in front of mirror and we say, this is my body, actually this is not. We're not able to see what is our capability to go in which way. But I think teacher and these people can see us where we can go. So
Yes.
we can, or they can give us the imagination goal that there you have to go.
Yes.
Not to here. This is not your land.
Yes. Yes. There are two things. First of all, as I said, our ignorance is like a blind spot. Whatever we are ignorant of lies in an area which is the same like our blind spot. The problem with a blind spot is that you don't even know that you have it. That's the problem. We all have this blind spot, yet we don't see it as a spot out there, because the mind, when it has lack of information, it fills up. The mind is a master in doing that. In whatever little bit of information it can get, it always creates a complete picture. It doesn't accept empty spaces or lack of knowledge. It will always, even if it has to fill up from memories or whatever. That's why we see snake as rope and we get deluded in everything. That is one thing. That is the biggest problem of our ignorance. So we need masters, first of all. That's why all the stories of deeper knowledge, they start with a conflict between gods and demons, because gods represent the rays of light and demons represent the darkness of ignorance. And it is their conflict. When a ray of light enters and darkness and light, they both conflict with each other, that is when questions arise. And these questions then inspire us to search further and to eradicate the darkness which is present within the questions by increasing the light which is already present in questions. That's why questioning has been given so much importance. But for that, a ray of light has to enter, which has to come from somewhere. And what better than if it can come from a living human being who lives in that light. That's what a guru means, because gu means darkness and ru means the eradicator, the destroyer of darkness. That is one thing. And what the other example that she gave reminded me of a beautiful story that when Virochana and Indra, the king of the demons and the king of gods, both went to Prajapati, he said, and they wanted to know about the self. About the self. He said, 32 years of meditation, and then I will teach you. They were gods, so for them 32 years of meditation was not much. So they had to do brahmacharya, which means to lead a way of life that leads towards that wisdom for 32 years, and then they go. And then he says, no, I won't teach you. First be fully arrayed. Bring all your beautiful clothes and all your beautiful ornaments and wear them, and then come to me. And then both of them do that. Then he puts a big pot of water in front of them. Then look into it. And whatever you see, that is Atman. That is Atman. And then they look into it, and a beautiful story unfolds from there. The deepest teachings unfold from there. But why it unfolds is the king of demon, he says, this is Atman. Wow, wonderful. And he goes back and he teaches everybody to his kingdom. He teaches, this body is Atman. Take good care of it. Nourish it. Put beautiful ornaments on it. This is Atman. And he becomes he's the king of demons. Indra also leaves, the king of God, he also leaves. But then he thinks, how is this possible? The moment I remove my ornaments and beautiful clothes, then if my beautiful body, beautifully ornamented, beautiful clothes is Atman, then if I remove them, then I'm no more Atman. But Atman is supposed to be eternal, ever present. So there is a problem with this teaching. So see, he engaged. He did not accept it based on faith, but he engaged with those teachings. How is this possible? This doesn't make sense to me. There is a problem. And then he goes back and he says, no, what you taught doesn't make sense to me. Teach me properly. He said, again 32 years of meditation. Then again he teaches him something, he leaves. Again he comes back with a problem. Again 32 years of meditation. Then again he leaves. He's taught something, he leaves, and then finally he comes back and he says, no, what you taught doesn't make sense to me. And then eventually he says, okay, now it has been 99 years, but 3 years more. 3 years more meditation. And that is when he then gives him the deepest teaching. But again, he never speaks of the real self, because the self cannot be spoken of. And the moment you speak about it, you delude the person. So better delude him in such a way so that he continues to ask questions. And it's a beautiful dialogue, and also shows what is the difference between a demon, and which means a being of darkness and a being of light. Accept the teachings on faith. This is your path. Accept the teachings after engaging with them. Engage with them constantly. Then this is the path. So, if we just stand in front of the mirror, then everyone in today's world is standing in front of the mirror in the morning. Before they go out, everybody stands in front of the mirror. Does it teach them anything?
In some Buddhist monastery, no mirror should be put in the room. It's one of their
Yes.
code, CODE.
Because it brings back the awareness.
So
Yes.
when I was in that meditation center, I didn't see any mirror in 4 months.
In 4 months. So you were not allowed to look at your face.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just a few, not looking.
That's amazing, because in reality it's extremely powerful, because we think that we have seen our face and we know our face, but it's just for the last 300, 400 years that we have such good mirrors that we can actually see our face. Otherwise, to live a life without a mirror.
Only for sometimes the curving the hair they use, but other times not at all.
Other times not.
Yeah.
Okay.
For
Mirror, just for
cutting the hair,
yeah.
because they all so only for that.
So everybody today stands in front of, they have huge rivers in their drawing rooms when putting on makeup and everything. We all stand in front of mirrors, but they don't teach us anything. Again, even to know how to use the mirror as a teacher, we need someone. So that's what she was trying to convey. So, okay. Yes. There is.
Only silly questions.
Or no silly questions at all. Yes.
Okay, so when you say, if I speak, let me speak from understanding and experience.
Yes.
Let me not speak. So every time I have experience, I think that I had an understanding after an experience.
Yes.
And then I share that because that is my truth.
That is your truth.
But after that, I have another experience
And then?
which negates what was that truth.
Yes. That
So
is how
then I
we
should
grow.
not have spoken because that was not the truth.
That's not the point, because as long as we are speaking from our experience, till then, that is the truth. Now, when a new experience has come, then the truth has changed for us. Then, of course, now, as we have grown further onto that level, and now this is our experience, then that was truth on that level. Now this is the truth on this higher level. And this is what we also find in the teachings of the masters. As part of this mantra, I'm going to speak about truths on different levels. There is no master who doesn't speak in different kinds of languages from different levels, whether it is the Buddha, whether it is the Upanishadic teachings. And the moment we fail to recognize this very simple fact, that even great masters can speak from different levels of truth, we confuse their teachings. And we create a confusion in their words. One of the fundamental ideas of resolving confusion in the teachings, which was followed by the Buddhists as well as the Upanishadic commentators, interpreters, was to look at the levels of speech. Because on certain levels, this is the truth. On a certain level, this is the truth. And that's why when he speaks here, I shall speak the universal truth and I shall speak the truth. The universal truth, the higher truth, and the truth, the lower truth, which is true on this level and which is true on that level. So he speaks of truths on different levels. So as we grow, we come across different truths. And as our understanding, then we realize, but we have to remember that another person who is still on that level, for him that will be the truth. So then, by conveying my truth to him, maybe I can help him to raise to my level, or I can also create confusion. So both things have to be carefully analyzed by a teacher who is speaking from a higher level. This is what we call, in the Buddhist teachings, upaya kaushalya, which means skill in how to convey the teachings. That is why Buddha spoke to different people, he gave different teachings to different people. Not a set of teachings for all. That's not possible. It just confuses. So that's another that's another realm which is not at all silly, but it is I think very, very fundamental and very basic.
So what about the subconscious mind then? Because sometimes you have so much exposure to videos, to books, to talks by other people, and you take
Yes,
these
you
ideas,
take
whatever,
these
but
ideas,
suddenly
yes.
the subconscious mind makes you believe that it is your experience and your truth when it actually is not.
When it's true.
And then you speak those words,
Yes,
but the
Yes.
experience is not yours.
yes.
So what does it say
I
about
think
that?
that is where meditation comes into the picture. That is where analysis, critical analysis of one's own convictions, one's own conclusions come into the picture. That there is no other way. There is no other way to constantly. I think that is what I understand by manana. This constant internal critical analysis. If I've concluded something, why does it seem to be true? What is the reason? Questioning it again and again. Even questioning one's own experiences. Constant questioning. Again, in this mantra, he uses a beautiful word, ahoratran sandadhami, which is the Sanskrit word, which, because you know Hindi, so the anusandhana. What does anusandhana mean? After we hear something, to constantly contemplate, critically analyze it, radically analyze it, day and night. His prayer is, let me do this day and night. So it's a constant, eternal process to weed out the unnecessary weeds. That's all we can do. That's why he speaks of anusandhana is a beautiful word. Talk about it when we come to it. Okay. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्